Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for being here. Thank you all, especially bearing in mind that it's late. We'll try to be quick so that we can all go for lunch, so don't be too worried about that. Thank you very much to you all, as I said, for being here, and I would also like to thank all the members of the panel. My name is Emiliano Labrador. I come from La Salle University, and I am the manager of a serious games masters, using game dynamics to serious processes. Do you know about the process, about the word gamification? Who is familiar with this term? Just to get a gist of the context. Here in this panel discussion, we have representatives from a number of sectors and industries, and we will talk about gamification. It is very common. It's a very common term for marketing, for education, or medicine. We use video game techniques, and we apply them to improve the user experience. So, something which might be boring or tedious or tough can become something more playful. And we have a number of applications, cultural issues, heritage issues, and so on and so forth. Let me introduce who we have here. First of all, we have Irina Grevtsova. She comes from the University of Barcelona. She's a member of the research group there on education and heritage. She's an architect. And secondly, we also have Mercè, Muntada, and Frank Perez. They come from a company called Compartia. They also use gamification techniques for tourism purposes and heritage applications. And we also have Daniel Olaizola and Mario Tarradas from the Full Head Studio. They also use augmented reality, gamification, and other techniques and they apply them to tourism, culture, and heritage applications. Please do be brief and tell us a little bit more about what you're doing. I would like to give the floor to Dia. I have prepared a presentation, but as we have little time, I will just fly over it. First of all, let me thank the organizers of this seminar for having invited me to participate in this. And it's a pleasure to be here because the topic that I am working with at the University of Barcelona, dissemination and education about heritage, is a highly relevant topic for tourism. Being here and sharing our experience with you is an honor. We have prepared this presentation along with Javier Marco, who unfortunately wasn't able to come because he's currently involved in this project and he is extremely busy. So the first thing that I wanted to say is we're talking about an educational project. It's part of a wider project that we have in the research department. It's part of the R&D project led by Joan Santacana, funded by Recercaixa 2014, and it's also part of my doctoral thesis, my PhD, and it's partly funded by the Catalan government. This app was a commission by the City Council of Barcelona for the Educator Cities conference that will be held in November 2014. This is an educational project. It uses new technologies to disseminate the values of cultural heritage. And it's also part of my own research. Therefore, it has a long far-reaching implications. I started doing an overview of all apps that are related to heritage in a number of cities, national and international projects. That was last year, and after doing an overview of the existing apps, I published a paper in a number of journals on that topic precisely. In November this year, I also analyzed all the apps in Barcelona, and I was especially interested in analyzing on the different types of apps which were related to heritage, and we reached the conclusion that many of the current apps were geared at tourists. They were very often marketing oriented rather than educationally oriented, and this helped us define the goals of the project that we wanted to prepare, and to think about a new innovative proposal which would be useful for the overall public, for an overall public, not only for tourists as most of the other apps. We thought about the app that would disseminate the values of historical cities, and the project was Open Air Museum, and we wanted to make the cities available, accessible for all kinds of publics. This is a context which is applied in many different projects. The model that we want to use should be we should be able to transpose or translate that into different educating cities. Anything that happens in a city can become a museum. For instance, squares are treated as museum halls. Streets are like the corridors in a museum, and visitors can wander around freely. When we analyzed all the existing apps, we realized that among the great supply, most of the apps used the itinerary, the route, as the leitmotif to explain the heritage. However, we thought that a smartphone offers so much wider possibilities. Could we make a proposal that would be fun? We think so. And that's why we offer users not to draft a specific route. Tourists or users would choose where they go, and they feel what they need to do. That's why the map we see here doesn't point out at the monuments or routes or geometrical shapes which would actually represent the rooms, the halls, and the corridors in a museum. Whenever the user is close to a museum, the user is warned, gets a flag or an audio sign that explains that he or she is close to a museum, within a museum space. And that's where you get a small image, a small flag saying, you have come to this exhibition space. Here you can find lots of mysteries. We're not telling them what they are going to discover, because otherwise you lose the excitement and the thrill of discovering something by yourself. That's why we use this type of warnings. You have this warning saying you've come to an enigma site, and here you have a number of educational tools. We've defined 7 different ones. Each tool is a different type of education initiative. For instance, here we see an eraser. With this, the visual reality is cleared or erased, and you would see a historical image of that area. Or there's another one called History Scan. You can scan the monument and you can find out whether that monument is fake or real. Talking about design, the conceptual design was done within the framework of this research that I mentioned earlier on, and it's based on the idea that users would be able to make to travel freely around the itinerary, and that this would be an open-air museum. In this project, the users were. We researchers devised what could be thrilling or interesting for tourists, and we based this in the idea of knowledge. If you don't mind, let's give the floor to other speakers. Just give me a second so that I can conclude. Here, we show content that we have used. All of them are images. We have collaborated with 3 of the largest museums in Barcelona, and they have given us the information we required, i.e. images of their objects, of their artifacts, and it was useful to place the artifacts, the location, in the location where they were found. We also used educational drawings and historical images. Thank you. That's all.
Emiliano, arranco, ¿me ayuda? Sí, ellos conectan y empiezan.
Cuando aparecen, sí.
Molt bé, doncs.
Sí, pues por favor, Mercè, cuando quieras.
Hola? Sí.
Mercè, floor is yours. Hello, let me start already whilst we have the slides up. First of all, thanks for still being here. And I came here with Ferran. We are a Catalan company, and we've designed and developed small mobile applications that incorporate some sort of gamification app. The first one is already in the market. It's called Citeum. The name of our company is Compartia. If you want to see a demo, we are just out there as you leave the room, so we can show it to you. And now we are working on the prototype of a second application with more gamification, and we will have a first version of it on November 17. And we are looking for users to test the application. I will describe this application very briefly. The gamification that we suggest in this second prototype is based on the badge system. Probably you've heard of it. Otherwise, is the badge, literally what we would wear when we were little. It's a development of those distinctive badges, like a pin. Here, there are digital badges, and we work with open badges. This is a technology by the Mozilla Firefox technology. Apart from their browsing engines, they do research in many other fields. So we've worked with the Mozilla Foundation and the MacArthur Foundation, and they've developed this Mozilla Open Badges technology. So these digital badges may be certified. So this badge is certified by the company, by the entity. So we have a digital badge of an important museum in Barcelona as MACBA is. Well, when it is an open badge, this means that the digital badge has been issued by MACBA, literally. So it's more powerful, it's safer than the platforms that we had so far for digital badges. Then, another important component of open badges, they can incorporate a lot of metadata. So these are digital badges that may incorporate a great deal of information, and then these are very difficult to copy and manipulate. Let me point something out here. The advantage of this system is that it may be exported, so the user creates his or her badge. Maybe it's something that the user would like to incorporate into his or her resume. Well, he can link it to LinkedIn or other social networks, so somehow the user may create a social network, knowledge-based social network, and people might be interested in getting in touch with people that are learning similar things to the ones they are learning. So here are a couple of profiles, digital profiles of several people, and they've incorporated their badges there. In the Anglo-Saxon market, in the US, UK, this is very fashionable now, and there are important investments in this field now. On the other hand, a badge may help you accredit your knowledge on arts or modernist arts or skills. I don't know, I'm a web designer, for instance. And skills, communication skills. A badge may accredit many things. Which is the anatomy of an open badge? What's the internal structure? Well, there is a description in the badge. So a badge of an expert, someone who's an expert in Art Nouveau. Well, what is it you need to be accredited as such? You need to, well, present your knowledge, so that's the badge name, description, criteria, issuer, very important, the validation certificate, metadata, the text of what's included in the badge. This is all included into what's called the badge anatomy. So it's like books. They are like information units because they contain a lot of data inside. As I said before, this is the amount of things that a digital badge can credit for, fields, competences, categories. So the content of the badge is really very rich. And portability, as Ferran was saying, here are examples. At the bottom, for instance, you see well, someone who's linked his badge to the Facebook profile. So it's just starting. We've seen now already badges on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's a different way of taking a look at a CV. It's a resume, because in the past it used to say, you know, the degrees and formal education, and now it's more like what we do and what we like to do. And just by way of comment, from tomorrow to Sunday, we will be in Segovia at this trade fair, the 3D Wiregam festival. It's very important, right? Yes, very important trade fair and festival. So we are gamifying, not digital badges because we won't have them, analogical badges, but we are gamifying, let's say, this festival, this side of networking. We are giving people badges so that people may best explain what their skills are. So the idea here is to establish networking contacts. So this will open tomorrow. So we will try to do badge-based networking so that people can explain themselves and what they do and what they like through this system. Sorry, you need to wrap up. Yes, badge culture. Badge culture, we will have the first version as of November 17th. We will have a web platform-based version first, and then we will develop the formal mobile application in January, the powerful application. Please, badge culture started off as a research project in 2013, and it's evolved very quickly. We are prototyping now the first version, and Ferran will show you now how to enter the platform, because we need users now. We need the early adopters to do these initial tests on the platform. What can you do in badge culture? You will be able to create badges that are associated with the culture in general. So we want to find the first testers coming from the cultural discipline, so museums, institutions, heritage institutions, this sort of bodies are very much welcome. You can then use those badges and suggest them, and there will be users that will ask for them. You can log in already, and as of the moment it's open, you will have special offers if you are one of the first ones to log in. And we hope that ever since November, that will be a fun way to start if you want to get familiar with this badge concept. And if you want to also see something else that's similar to the badge concept but in museums, take a look at the Museum of Art at Dallas, that in 2013 they started with their badge allocation system, and they have published already their outcomes now. So take a look at their website, the Dallas Museum. Thank you very much. That's all from us.
Gracias, Mercè.
Thank you very much, Ferran and Mercè. Thank you very much. I would like now to give the floor to Mario. We will start by showing a video clip explaining what we do. Hello. We are Mario Tarradas and Daniel Olaizola from the Full Head Studio. We are an augmented reality lab. We both come from digital post-production, especially related to advertising. And 2 years ago, we started to work to create the Full Head Studio to see how we could apply augmented reality to digital technologies. We've been exploring the field of tourism. As you can see this in this small demo, there are a number of demos that we've been doing, especially focused on tourist guides, mixed up with graphical adventures, as well as also adventure games applied to other experiences and visits in town. We also have the 2.0 and some support video guides also, and supported tools for help tools for museums themselves. The goals of Full Head as a lab are adding a layer of augmented reality, bringing together the digital and the analogic worlds. We see that there is like a gap between the two of them. You're either in one or in the other world, and augmented reality brings them together in one single space. Besides this, we're also trying to work on how we can find a new narrative for the implementation of AR, augmented reality, because we think that text and video game narrations are not probably the most suitable media for this technology. We believe that there's much more to do about this, and we can juice it out much more thoroughly. And one of the things that we specialize in, or at least we try to, has to do with implementing augmented reality in open outdoor spaces. And we especially emphasized static markers on a table and so on. But then at Full Head Studio, we decided that we wanted to transfer augmented reality to the real space, buildings, streets, and so on a second layer of augmented reality. But that's still a bit far from us, from where we are at the moment. Let me show you this quickly. This is what we explained before, and Danny will now present the projects that we would like to mention. The idea is trying to explain a little bit the experiments and projects that we are engaged in order to apply gamification and augmented reality to heritage and tourism projects. The first project that we have here stems from the idea of having a sort of gamified guide about the Güell Park in Barcelona. We have a video game approach. We introduce video game elements to reality through smartphones and augmented reality, we can now do highly realistic things in terms of integration. And this guide is based on a number of augmented reality mini games that you can play with on your tablet or on your smartphone, and they are located in a number of specific areas in the whale park. It's mapped on the territory, so we use some elements from the park in order to play with them. This requires a research process to see what elements we can use and see how far we can reach. We develop this type of elements based on this research. We develop the elements that we can use, and based on this we create this narrative, which can be either more playful, more game-like, or more educational-like, depending on what priority we want to emphasize. One of the main features of this project, let me add, was finding a real environment with lots of tourists, with changing weather conditions, and see how far we could push augmented reality. This is a project that we have here outside on one of the tables, and we can make some demonstrations. This was successful, but it was a successful failure, we could say, because the first section that we've done, which is the staircase going to the column hall, you had to find some couples, some matches in the mosaic areas. It works very well, but one thing was essential for us, and that was seeing how this would work outdoors. And we realized that you really need to work much harder so that augmented reality and heritage can go hand in hand. For instance, at midday, on that staircase, there's no way to see a thing on a mobile device, because you have the sunshine on your screen and it reflects everything. So this is one of the fields where this project was extremely useful to see, for instance, how much autonomy the device has, and we need to use both hands as well, so it's not always so user-friendly. And then to see the requirements, so the environmental requirements that need to be taken into account when developing any app, because weather conditions, light conditions, and so on are very relevant. Well, this project wanted to introduce a classical video adventure approach and mechanics in a very simple way. Let me explain how this works. Level 1 is a game that you do in partners, and you can play this on the staircase. There are some mosaics there, and behind the mosaics we find some elements, and you need to find matches, like in a memory game. And these are elements that we need to take into account to work on the playability. These are real images of the demo that we've seen there. For instance, that shell with a pearl inside. These are part of the images. We also thought about a different level. For instance, going to the second area in the whale park. In the columns room, in the columns hall, there are some mosaics. If we look at them through our mobile device, we will see some clues, some hints that will lead to the next level of the game. We also have these guides, game guides. We want to give them an added value. They have touristic information, and in many cases, when, for instance, we have families traveling around, if the kids have seen the third buildings, they are bored with that. So let's not fool ourselves about that. And we would like to offer a second level of entertainment but keeping the kids in the reality that they are experiencing. So, Dad, I want to find this culture, or I want to find this image, and that's interesting as well. And then yet a third objective that we had, we wanted to lure local tourists as well into those events. For instance, a Barcelona inhabitant that would be enticed to go to the Park Güell again because they have this playful information, this playful experience that they can enjoy. We also have other projects. They're on the table out there. We can show them to you. For instance, this adventure games. Well, thank you very much for the 3 projects. We had a 4th one by Fira Toma. It comes from Palestine. She has not been able to come. Maybe she will come in the afternoon, but in any case, we would like to greet her on this trip.
Los ponentes de la mesa, teniendo en cuenta.
I would like to ask the speakers, bearing in mind that maybe people here in the room don't know about the word gamification or how you apply these techniques, for those of us who work in this area, gamification, of course, wants to promote motivation. You do gamification in marketing and education to motivate the students. So whenever motivation is necessary, gamification it has a place. But tourism and heritage, do you think it's necessary to gamify tourism and heritage? Please go ahead. Well, for us, it's basic because in our studio, gamification is the key. Maybe it's not necessary, but it is an added value, and there are proposals that are being born now and that really take this into account. We saw it over coffee. If I need to choose and pick from a Lonely Planet guidebook or another guide by a different manufacturer, maybe I would stick to the tradition, to the known thing to me. But here with the gamification, we become more than an observer. It becomes interactive, and depending on the market niche, gamification is is in our favor. Family tourism, for instance, and here gamification is fantastic for us because it helps us adapt the tourism visit to the different members of the family, so it's more interesting for the child and it's more narrative for the mother, etc. So we can play with it. Along the same lines, for tourism, the idea is to arouse interest. We need to awaken this interest, and sometimes you need another effort. We know the difficulty of asking for another effort, and gamification is a way so that this small effort is more pleasant. The more knowledge we want to give the user, the better place the gamification might take. I agree with Mercè. Gamification, I think, helps us turn the user into a protagonist, into a leading character. If you see something from a passive standpoint, maybe it's not as interesting compared to when you really start to interact. So we faced a problem here in the beginning when we first developed the idea of an open-air museum. The city has an open-air museum, and we would explain it to many people, to different people, and we saw that it was difficult. It was a difficult concept to understand. People are just not used to that concept. So gamification has helped us simplify the concept, the message that we wanted to convey to the general audience by means of a game. Because, play, it's universal. It's easy to be understood. A different question now. You offer the experience to the end user, the tourist, the museum visitor, the bypassers. But Do you think it would be useful to gamify the internal side of heritage? You know, the director of the museum, the staff in the museum. Do you think that would improve the experience, or same or more? Not just gamifying the experience, you know, in the final user, but the service provider experience. Well, in batch culture, in internal gamification, the application, so that all the users can have their badge and do an activity related to heritage, etc., we think it's very important that the creator of the activity, this person that develops content that traps the user in the end, that badge issuer must be gamified as well, because we think that not all the issuers will be large institutions, you know. They may be a single person, someone who's just finished his studies in history and is just walking around his city. So there is a further motivation there to convey this knowledge, to transmit it to other people. So it's bi-directional for us, and it's totally democratic for us. We would treat the user in the same level as we would treat the creator. Irina, Mario, Daniel, what do you think? Maybe you don't have any product as such, but do you think it might be interesting? Would it be better? Would it improve my experience as an end user? Well, depending on the product, if the product has an important gamification side, of course the creator must be somehow involved. But it will depend, I think, on the product very much, on the specificities of the company. I am precautious, and I have the feeling that gamifying the organization, gamifying for the sake of it, might be dangerous. You may, mislead some of the roles, but when the product is important in the sense that it may be easily gamified, that shouldn't be a problem. I would like to be gamified, because I think it's a very emotional process, and it's also very creative. If we all start to play now, I think we would create very good ideas and very innovative ones. We're all children after all, and playing is a pleasure, isn't it? Well, you take me to saying there are many people in the middle of the process, not just the end user, but there are many people in between that have something to do, even if the product is heritage based. Let me go back to the final user. The perception of heritage, there's the same word in Spanish, it's changing the letter with heritage and marriage, and he said marriage. Okay, marriage can change a lot, but heritage. Okay, heritage. How can gamification help us overcome the cultural barriers when it comes to going beyond those differences? Shouldn't we not perceive things the same? I'm referring to this layer that is on top of heritage itself. How can it help us, I don't know, maybe get a different approach to that perception? In our case, since we are applying a video game language, it's kind of a universal language, and it's widely known. So the dynamic that we suggest are very international, things that people are used to already. Mobile video games, well, it's universal now, so taking this and integrating it with heritage, I think it makes it more accessible. Any further opinions? Irina? Well, I can also mention the project that we are working on, because the project that we showed is an inclusive one. In the end, we are thinking of developing a product, an educational model for all sorts of publics. So regardless of cultural differences, race, etc. For us, well, anyone should understand what they are seeing around them. So the game in this case helps us clarify, create a very fun way of knowing, because we all like to play around, and the tools that we use are very visual and very easy to handle. So we think it might be interesting and fun, both for children and also for the general adult public. I would like to open up the floor now for discussion, unless there is any final comment from the panel. Anything else you would like to contribute in relation to tourism and heritage, or otherwise we can open some Q&A. Are there any questions from the floor? Thank you. I wanted to ask the two first speakers, you know very well your projects, but maybe you could tell us about the game dynamics. The first project, how do you actually play with the heritage out there in the open air? What is it we do? What is the game about? And in order to get the badges, yes, there's a lot of information there, metadata, but in order to get a badge, what do I do? That is my question. Yeah, Irina first. In our case, the idea was to create a discovery game, so to show the heritage as if it were an enigma, a mystery. You download the application, and there is a guide that tells you a little bit what that game is about. And we use the augmented reality and radar, which is universal. And we are now working on this augmented reality phase. But in the future, we would like to open the content up so that it can be shared in the social media, in the social network. There will be a contest. You know, people in the museum at the same time, they can try to solve the enigma and see who gets it first, who gets the answer first. And then maybe badges, we can incorporate badges also to have a collaboration with other museums. I don't know if I made myself clear, more or less. Oh, okay. Our project at Badge Culture is very easy for the user. It's having a map and a list, and you can discover the activities that he or she can do very nearby. Second thing, he needs to leave the home and do the activity. He needs to really move. That's the challenge. We have a layer of a game which is in the application itself with some storytelling, so then the user can get stuck in the application, but the trophies there are not that important. But since they can do the activity, if they do the activity really, then the prize is the badge. It's like, instead of doing something that somebody recommended, well, I find this recommendation in a gamified application that's is urging me to leave my home and play the game so that I can get the certification, and then I can show this badge, this prize that I got to the rest of the world, to the whole world. So there's the storytelling, which is internal to the application, and the real world, because people need to do the cultural activity that are available in their city, because many people just don't know about them. So it's like an agenda, cultural agenda. Well, I would say it's, yeah, an agenda with a customized to-do list or a to-do map, and you can share your interests with your friends or with your neighbors. You can complicate things as much as you like, but as of November 17th, we'll start easy and see, if people actually uses it and likes it. So please sign in, log in, register, and helps us. Tell us if you understand, at least. Tell us if you understand the rules of the game. Thank you. Are there any further questions, comments? Please go ahead.
Speakers, I would like to ask, is it possible if you gamifying the experience in heritage site to convert the heritage site as background, and the user or the visitor will be exciting with the games or the experience, the storytelling, and the heritage site will be as background.
No estoy seguro de la pregunta. ¿Podrías repetir, por favor?
Could you maybe reformulate your question? They didn't quite understand. Could you please repeat the question?
My question is when we changing the user experience as games, gamifying the experience, is it possible to change or to convert the historical site as background of the game?
Oh, okay. I think que lo he entendido. I think that I understand the question. Sí, bueno, contestas tú mejor. Bueno, pero quieres contestar tú mejor. Ataca. Me ha parecido entender que preguntabas.
So you're asking whether we can change the real environment with historic background. Is that more or less what you were asking? Okay. So, yes, one of the things that we wanted to show you in our video is the fact that we can take the facade of a building, the way it is right now, and overlap on that facade reconstruction that is totally different, a historical, image of centuries back, or in the future, a futuristic simulation. So we need to take into account the light specifications of the environment, because we are working with image recognition. The facade is going to be very different at 9 a.m. or 19 p.m. So we need to take this into account, but in principle we could pick any environment as a backdrop, as a background, and then remap it with a second layer. Of course, the technique is complicated and you need to decide on a side-by-side basis, but we are now experimenting with other systems like beacons and things like that help us geolocate things, not via GPS, because there's a few meters deviation and that is complicated, but beacons or image recognition that support each other, that will be very helpful, so that you can really overlap the real thing with the augmented reality thing. There's a Metallo company, US company from Germany, sorry, and they are thinking of this sort of reconstruction, image recognition, GPS system, and they work with CAD system and mapping systems of the whole the building itself. Is that what you were asking as the speaker? Okay, thank you. Fantastic.
Vale. Pues, bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Okay then, thanks very much. I would like to thank all the panelists. It's been very interesting. Thanks to the audience. It's so late. And well, hopefully we've opened up your mind, especially for those of you who were not familiar with this concept of gamification and the different choices that you might pick from if you want to enjoy a new experience. Thank you very much. See you soon.